The soft hum of the restaurant was a symphony of wealth. Silverware clinked against fine china, murmured conversations filled the air, and the scent of saffron-infused butter wafted from the open kitchen. Vincent Hayes stood near the bar, swirling a glass of red wine between his fingers, his sharp gaze sweeping over the floor like a king surveying his kingdom. His restaurant, Hayes and Company, was the kind of place where only the elite dined, where every detail had been crafted to impress. And tonight was no different. The VIP guests had arrived in droves, their designer heels tapping against the marble floor. Journalists hovered at the edges, ready to capture the essence of yet another flawless night under Vincent's rule. But amidst the perfection, a single flaw irritated him like a splinter beneath the skin. Arthur. In the farthest corner of the kitchen, the elderly dishwasher hunched over a sink piled high with plates, his frail hands scrubbing away remnants of meals he could never afford. His white uniform, once crisp, had dulled over time, much like the man himself. There was a weariness about him, a slow and deliberate way he moved, as if every motion required twice the effort it once had. Vincent had tolerated Arthur's presence for years, longer than he should have. But patience had limits, and Vincent's had reached its breaking point. A crash. The room fell silent. Heads turned. Arthur stood frozen, shards of porcelain scattered at his feet. A single broken plate might have gone unnoticed, but this was an entire tray, its remnants glittering under the chandelier's glow. The weight of 100 judgmental eyes pressed against his back, but none heavier than Vincent's. The restaurant owner's jaw tightened. He set down his wine glass with a measured grace, striding forward with the slow, deliberate pace of a predator approaching wounded prey. Arthur. His voice was smooth but razor-sharp, slicing through the silence like a blade. Arthur's hands trembled as he bent to pick up the shattered pieces. I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes. It slipped. Slipped. Vincent's laugh was devoid of humor. That's the third time this month. Tell me, Arthur, are my dishes too heavy for you now? Are your old bones giving out? A ripple of uncomfortable chuckles spread through the staff. Some turned away, feigning distraction, but no one spoke up. Arthur's knuckles whitened as he clenched a shard of porcelain. He wanted to speak, to explain, to plead, but words failed him. Vincent exhaled sharply, shaking his head. I have guests worth millions in this room, and you decide tonight's the perfect time to make a spectacle of yourself. Do you know how much those plates cost? Arthur swallowed hard. I can pay for. Pay. Vincent scoffed. With what? Your paycheck barely covers your rent. He stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough for Arthur to hear. Let's not pretend you're anything more than a relic taking up space in my kitchen. The words struck deeper than any slap. Arthur had worked here for over 2 decades. He had started when the restaurant was nothing more than a small bistro, washing dishes while Vincent, then a young entrepreneur, barked orders at chefs. He had seen the place grow, seen Vincent rise to power. But now, standing in the wreckage of shattered porcelain and dignity, Arthur felt like an afterthought, a ghost in a place he had once called home. Vincent sighed, as if burdened by the very act of acknowledging him. You're done here, Arthur. Take your things and go. Arthur's breath caught in his throat. Sir, please. I need this job. Vincent's gaze remained impassive. And I need a dishwasher who doesn't cost me a fortune in broken plates. We don't always get what we want. Arthur's lips parted, but nothing came out. For a brief second, his eyes met Vincent's, pleading, searching for some trace of the man he had once known. But there was nothing. Just cold indifference. The silence stretched until Vincent's impatience won. He snapped his fingers at a nearby waiter. Help him pack up. The spell broke. The restaurant resumed its symphony, the guests returning to their meals, the staff moving with a little more urgency, eager to put distance between themselves and the man who had just been erased. Arthur turned, moving toward the back room with the slow, measured steps of a man carrying more than just his belongings. The weight of years pressed against his shoulders. The sound of his own heartbeat thudded in his ears, drowning out the world. He gathered his few belongings, a worn-out coat, a small lunchbox, a faded photograph tucked into his locker. His late wife smiled up at him from the frame, her eyes filled with warmth he would never feel again in this place. He traced a finger over the glass, inhaling shakily before slipping the photo into his pocket. As he stepped outside, the night air bit at his skin, crisp and unforgiving. The neon sign above the restaurant flickered, the letters glowing in an opulent gold, a reminder of the empire he had spent years serving, only to be cast aside like a broken plate. He turned once, glancing through the window. Vincent was back at the bar, laughing with his guests, the scene inside untouched by the storm that had just passed. Arthur tightened his coat around himself and walked away, his figure shrinking into the night, swallowed by the city that had no place for men like him. And somewhere, deep in the shadows, fate began to turn its gears. The air inside Hayes and Company felt different. It wasn't something Vincent could explain, just an odd creeping sensation that settled deep in his bones. Business was thriving, as always. The clinking of glasses, the hum of low laughter, the rhythmic shuffle of polished shoes against marble, it was the sound of success. Yet beneath it, something felt off. It started small. The dishwasher jammed, flooding the kitchen floor with soapy water. The chefs cursed as they waded through the mess, slipping, stumbling, their tempers fraying. Vincent dismissed it as poor maintenance. Then, a shipment of imported truffles, ones he had personally approved for an upcoming tasting menu, arrived moldy, unusable. The supplier swore they had been fresh upon delivery. An annoyance, nothing more. But then the lights began flickering. It was always brief, just long enough for a second of complete darkness before the bulbs sputtered back to life. No one else seemed to notice, or if they did, they brushed it off as a faulty circuit. Yet every time it happened, Vincent felt it, that same eerie sensation, like the air had thickened, like something unseen was watching. He buried the feeling beneath his usual arrogance, snapping at staff, berating them for their incompetence. But no amount of control could explain what happened next. Late one night, long after the last guest had left, Vincent remained in his office, sipping a glass of whiskey as he reviewed the night's earnings. He took pride in the numbers, success measured in cold, hard figures. Then, out of the corner of his eye, something moved. He turned, but the room was empty. The shadows stretched long in the dim glow of his desk lamp. He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. Lack of sleep, that's all. He returned his attention to the papers, but just as his pen touched the page, the room's security monitor flickered. The screen displayed the restaurant's empty kitchen. Stainless steel counters gleamed under the faint glow of emergency lights. The dish station, usually a whirlwind of steam and motion, stood eerily still. Then, a figure moved. Vincent's breath hitched. The camera's grainy resolution distorted the details, but there was no mistaking the slow, deliberate shuffle of an old man. Arthur. It was impossible. Vincent had fired him. He had watched him leave, had seen the way the cold swallowed his frail form. And yet, here he was, standing in the kitchen, his back turned to the camera, his shoulders hunched just as they always had been over the sink. The rational part of Vincent's mind fought for control. Maybe Arthur had returned, desperate for his job. Maybe he had snuck in through the back entrance, hoping to go unnoticed. But the moment Vincent reached for the security phone to call the night manager, Arthur moved. Slowly, agonizingly, he turned toward the camera. His face was obscured by the poor lighting, but something about the way he stood, unnaturally still, sent ice crawling up Vincent's spine. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he was gone. Vincent's pulse thundered in his ears. He rewound the footage, scanning frame by frame. Arthur's figure, unmistakable. And then, nothing. He slammed the laptop shut. Enough. It was a trick of the light, a shadow, a malfunctioning camera. He refused to let his mind spiral into absurdity. Arthur was gone. Gone and irrelevant. And yet, as Vincent locked his office and strode toward the exit, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching. The following days brought more disturbances. Dishes shattered with no one near them. The stove refused to light, no matter how many times the chef tried. The air in the kitchen grew thick with an inexplicable chill, a stark contrast to the heat of the ovens. Then the whispers started. Soft, indistinct, just beneath the hum of the restaurant. At first, Vincent thought it was the staff gossiping under their breath, but the whispers were never directed at anyone else. Only him. Late at night, when the restaurant had emptied, they grew louder. His name. Always his name. Vincent brushed it off. Stress. Overwork. A guilty conscience, perhaps, though he wouldn't admit it. He prided himself on being untouchable, unshakable. But then, a letter arrived. There was no return address, only his name scrawled in trembling handwriting. He hesitated before opening it, a foreign unease curling in his stomach. Inside, a single line. "You took everything from me, Vincent. Now it's your turn." His throat went dry. Arthur. The name clawed its way to the surface of his mind like a half-buried nightmare. He had pushed the old man out without a second thought, discarded him like spoiled produce. He had expected him to fade into obscurity. Instead, he had returned. Vincent forced a laugh. Short, brittle. It was absurd. The letter was a prank, a ridiculous attempt to unnerve him. But still, he needed to be sure. That evening, against every rational instinct, he drove to Arthur's apartment. The building was a decrepit thing, its brick exterior worn by time, its windows yellowed with dust. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time, ignoring the uneasy silence pressing against him. He rapped sharply against the door. No answer. Again, louder this time. Still nothing. A neighbor's door creaked open. A frail woman peered at him through thick spectacles, her eyes narrowing. "You looking for Arthur?" Vincent nodded. "Where is he?" The woman pursed her lips, studying him for a long moment before sighing. "Died a few nights ago. Heart attack." The world tilted. Died. Vincent's mind rejected the word, shoved it away like an unwelcome guest. "That's not possible," he said, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were a lie. The weight of it settled in his chest. Arthur hadn't written the letter. Arthur hadn't been at the restaurant. So who had? The woman continued, unaware of the ice seeping into Vincent's veins. "Shame, really. He worked himself to the bone, you know. Poor man worried himself sick after losing that job." She shook her head. "No one deserves to go like that." Vincent swallowed, his throat tight, dry. Something flickered in the hallway's dim light. A shadow. Too tall to be the old woman. Too still. His breath stalled. When he turned, the corridor was empty. But he knew, deep in the marrow of his bones, he wasn't alone. Arthur was still here. And he was waiting. The cold air of the hallway clung to Vincent's skin long after he left Arthur's apartment building. He drove back in silence, his grip tightening around the wheel, his thoughts a tangled mess of disbelief and dread. Arthur was dead. The old man was gone, buried beneath the weight of the life Vincent had so easily taken from him. And yet, something lingered. The whispers. The letter. The impossible image on the security footage. It made no sense, and that was the part that terrified him. The restaurant was empty when he arrived, save for the lingering scent of truffle oil and the faint echoes of an evening long past. The place had never felt unwelcoming before, but as he stepped inside, the walls seemed to press inward, the chandeliers casting distorted shadows that flickered and stretched. He exhaled sharply, rolling his shoulders, forcing logic back into his thoughts. He was exhausted, paranoid. The weight of guilt had finally caught up to him, that was all. There was no other explanation. He just needed rest. Tomorrow, things would return to normal. The kitchen was dark as he passed through it, the air thick with the remnants of steam. He paused by the dish station, his fingers trailing over the sink's cool steel. 4 years, Arthur had stood here, scrubbing away the excesses of the wealthy, his hands worn, his body bent with age. Vincent had never given it a second thought. He had never considered what it meant to live a life like that, until now. A sound echoed through the kitchen. A single drip. Then another. His breath hitched. The faucet was turning, slowly, as if guided by an unseen hand. A thin stream of water trickled down, swirling in the drain like ink bleeding into paper. His pulse pounded in his ears as he reached out, hesitating before twisting the handle shut. The moment he did, the air shifted. A whisper. Right behind him. His name. Vincent spun. His breath caught in his throat. The kitchen was empty, but the sensation remained, a presence thick enough to taste. His heart slammed against his ribs as he backed away, nearly tripping over his own feet. And then, the lights flickered out. Darkness swallowed the room whole. The only sound was his own breath, ragged and shallow. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers slick with sweat. The screen cast a weak glow, just enough to illuminate the space around him. A movement. Across the kitchen, past the prep station. A shadow, slow and deliberate. Vincent's grip tightened around the phone as the figure stepped forward. The dim light caught the edges of something familiar. The hunched posture, the slow shuffle, the face that should not have been there. Arthur. His skin was sallow, his eyes sunken, but there was no mistaking him. He stood just as he always had, his hands wrinkled and work-worn, his expression unreadable. Vincent's breath came in shallow gasps, his body frozen in place. "This isn't real," he whispered, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were a lie. Arthur stepped closer, his presence heavier than the air itself. His voice, when it came, was no more than a breath. "You took everything from me, Vincent." Vincent stumbled back, shaking his head. I didn't mean to. Arthur's eyes bore into him, dark pools of something endless. "You left me with nothing. No job. No home. No chance." The words seeped into the room like smoke. "And now, you will understand what it means to lose everything." The walls groaned as if the very foundation of the restaurant shuddered beneath his words. A violent gust of air tore through the space, knocking Vincent off balance. Plates crashed from their shelves, the room filling with the deafening sound of shattering porcelain. The air grew suffocating, thick with the scent of something burnt and rotting. Vincent's knees hit the ground. I'm sorry." His voice cracked, raw and desperate. "I was cruel. He swallowed hard, forcing the words out. "I was wrong." The restaurant trembled, the shadows writhing along the walls. Arthur did not move. He simply stared, as if waiting, as if measuring the weight of Vincent's words. Vincent's chest heaved. I can make it right." His own voice sounded foreign to him, stripped of arrogance, of power. I'll donate to shelters. I'll pay for whatever your family." He didn't even know if Arthur had any. He had never asked. The realization cut through him like a blade. Arthur remained silent. Vincent's hands trembled as he pressed them against the cold tile. "Please," he whispered, his voice small. "I don't want to die like this." A long silence stretched between them, thick and unyielding. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the air shifted. The weight pressing against his chest lifted, the room stilling. The shadows receded, slinking back into their corners. The broken plates remained, the mess around him undeniable, but Arthur was gone. The lights flickered once, twice, then settled. Vincent remained on the floor, his breath ragged. Slowly, he forced himself to stand, gripping the edge of the counter for support. His entire body ached, his mind a storm of disbelief and something deeper, something raw. When he finally turned toward the exit, his gaze landed on the dish station one last time. There, beside the sink, lay Arthur's photograph. The one Vincent had seen him carry for years. The edges were curled, the image faded, but the smile of the woman in the picture remained warm, untouched by time. Vincent's throat tightened. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the paper. For the first time in his life, he felt small. The next morning, Hayes and Company did not open. Instead, a notice hung on the front door. Closed until further notice. No one knew why. And Vincent never spoke of that night again.